Saturday, October 22, 2022. Dear friends, I do not intend to be the owner of the truth nor to determine the conduct of each one in their investments, but only to report my opinion on how I see Petrobras overvaluation to 530 billion Brazilian reals of market value based on the last quotation of your actions. Initially, we will observe the ADR pbr.a in Petrobras in the period between September 30, 2022 and October 21, 2022. First, let's see the value of Petrobras preferred share, Petrobras, in this period. The share opened at 29.22 Brazilian reals and closed at 37.72 Brazilian reals at the end of the period, an appreciation of 29.09%. The ADR of Petrobras preferred share in New York, pbr.a, in the same period went from $10.79 to $14.68, an appreciation of 36.05%. The dollar, in turn, went from 5.4013 Brazilian reals to 5.1716 Brazilian reals, a devaluation of 4.25% against the real. Discounting the dollar, the appreciation in reais was 31.8%. These data show that Petrobras' action followed the appreciation of the foreign financial market. Here comes the first contradictory fact: as Brazil sells its oil in dollars and the dollar devalued in the period, which without higher sales volumes means lower revenues. Brent, the price of oil on the New York Stock Exchange, went from $88.97 to $93.50, an appreciation of 5.09%, which offset the loss with the devaluation of the dollar against the real. So far, the data do not justify this overvaluation in stocks, considering that we are in the midst of a possible global recession. The government injected aid, reduced taxes, facilitated several lines of credit, which artificially gave some relief to Brazilian inflation and an air of control, but these mechanisms are not permanent and their days are numbered. Furthermore, the worsening of the world scenario would quickly deteriorate the local scenario. What happened in the period between the payment of dividends on August 11, 2022 and October 21, 2022? There was a readjustment of kerosene, gas, gasoline and diesel due to the decrease of these products in the international market, but recently Petrobras did not pass on the recent increases, assuming the loss of the difference until the end of the election period. In the survey carried out by the Brazilian Association of Fuel Importers, ABICOM, the difference between the average price practiced in Brazilian refineries and those in the Gulf of Mexico rose to 14%. To return to parity with imports, an increase of 0.83 Brazilian reals per liter of diesel would be necessary, calculates the entity. The price of gasoline has been unchanged for 47 days by Petrobras, and the average lag is 5% this Wednesday, October 19, 2022, according to a survey by the Brazilian Association of Fuel Importers, ABICOM. Therefore, the average adjustment should be 0.18 Brazilian reals per liter to return to parity. How is this positive for stocks? As for the electoral scenario, some describe how the continuity of the government would not bring new scenarios in the financial market, with stability, without changes in investments, shareholder remuneration, or changes in Petrobras board. Is it true? Even if it were, it would be more of the same, nothing better. The only fact that has been listed by the government itself would be the collection of taxes on profits and dividends on shareholders. Taxes on profits and dividends are not cause for any celebration in the financial market. Once again, we go back to the initial situation. So far, nothing convinces me of this valuation of desperation in stocks. I just don't see it, but leave it in the comments if you have a different justification. I'll be happy to read your comments carefully even if they differ from mine. Am I wrong? Let's see some historical example. The history of the Dutch tulip bubble began in 1593, when tulip bulbs from Turkey began to be resold. The plant became more and more desirable, which made the price rise throughout the Netherlands. The demand was so great that, as early as the 17th century, speculators began to buy tulip buds to resell at exorbitant prices. The rarer and more beautiful the plant, the greater its value. Between 1 month and another, the price of tulips increased more than 20 times. The lack of control was so high that some Dutch people were able to exchange all their possessions for a single flower bulb. Can you imagine a situation like this? The result, of course, could not be other than the formation of a large financial bubble, the first known worldwide. The herd effect is the main driver of speculative bubbles. It is caused when people start to reproduce the behavior of others, without there being a logical reasoning behind the attitudes. It is difficult to predict the formation of a financial bubble. In general, they are formed by excess market liquidity. And, from time to time, they appear in the current market. The bubble bursts the moment investors realize that the price of assets is not in line with their value. Most investors decide to sell their securities at the same time, which causes the assets to depreciate. We can conclude that, due to the unpredictability of financial bubbles in world markets, it is important to always carefully analyze the assets that undergo rapid and intense appreciation. And carefully evaluate your investments, in order to avoid falling into traps and suffering from eventual financial bubbles. Petrobras share hit its highest point, a record that raised the company's value to the highest value ever, 530 billion Brazilian reais in just 21 days for no apparent reason, which brings us to the question of when they raised the value of shares to higher levels and what will happen when investors make their sales, because they no longer want to spend more resources with the purchase of shares and decide to realize their profits. Are we too far from it? Dividends exceeding 162% of net income in the second quarter of 2022 make us think. First, how is paid more than the net profit? Where did the extraordinary additional money come from, which the single Federation of Oil Workers answers to us? It came from the divestments with the sale of refineries, which reduces Petrobras equity, use of cash flow, and even the decrease in reserve funds for accumulated profits over the years, in the form of advance payments. In the period considered from April to June, considered for the payment of dividends for the second quarter of 2022, the price of a barrel of oil was above $100. In the current period, it is remaining in the region of $95. When the product loses value in the market, the margins are smaller, the fixed costs are the same, and, therefore, the profit decreases considerably. Dividends, share price drops after payment. Worth to buy? Dividends are the portion of net income that a company distributes to its shareholders. Payment is made with the funds held by the company in its cash. Cash, in turn, is one of the items that make up a company's assets, as well as its physical facilities or inventories, for example. And the equity value is an element considered in the investor's account to decide for how much they will trade the company's shares on the market. When distributing dividends, the company needs to take cash out of cash to pay the amounts promised to shareholders. Therefore, it is as if a part of its assets disappeared, because it was handed over to investors. To reflect this flow, stock prices are adjusted, excluding the amount of dividends. It only makes sense to keep the stock to receive dividends, therefore, if the stock continues to rise. Answer the simple question: did the stock not have a very fast appreciation in the short term, being at the historical maximum, with a monthly appreciation of more than 25% without any new facts, with a world crisis that doesn't help, with lower remuneration values as a result of the aforementioned facts? What are you going to do? Put it in the comments. What am I going to do is avoid buying Petrobras while I can. If you like the debate, even if you don't fully agree with the ideas or have opinions to the contrary, leave your like and share so that we can see all possible opinions on the subject. Whatever decision you make, I hope you have good luck, as only the market will tell who is right at this time.